everybody. Welcome to an early morning edition of the Lightning Round podcast. We're here. Hope you've got your drink of choice. This is kind of after hours, but in the early morning. Jamie, welcome. Good morning.
Morning. How you doing?
Welcome. I'm good. So we will talk about this first preseason game, some of the winners and losers, if you will, of this game, and talk about all the depth players that played yesterday and some guys that are rising, some guys that might be falling. First off, before we do all that, right now we're live on YouTube. So if you're listening to this podcast, we're going to be on YouTube from here on out. Something we haven't really been a part of, but we're going to be doing that from now on. So however you get your Lightning Round podcast, which is usually the audio version and sometimes a video version for after hours, we're just going to do video for everything. So go find the Lightning Round podcast on YouTube. Go subscribe because we'll be doing lots of videos now. We're just deciding to go all in on YouTube too. So we'll be there. So join us over there. Make sure to subscribe. And we're going to be doing that for the rest of the season. And then the other thing is just a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Lightning Round Patreon and a part of our Discord. We had our first real game day channel going during the game, and it is so much fun. If you want a nice place, a safe place where you can come in and talk Chargers, have a little laugh, our Discord is a real fun space to be in. It was great last night.
Yeah, the game day channel was awesome last night. It's a safe place unless you're known for, I don't know, maybe pushing Jordan Love on the Chargers a couple years ago or a couple other things. It may not be so safe, but otherwise it's really safe. It's really fun. There might be some sarcasm.
He's in the comments here, Jamie. If you want to just refer to him by name, go. Craig.
No, but seriously though, I mean, there might be some sarcasm mixed in. There might be the occasional, shot at a player just in fun. But overall, all opinions are welcome. We're having a lot of fun. The game day channel was a nice addition, and I think everybody who was a part of it last night really enjoyed it. It was a stress-free, negativity-free. Yes, it's Lightning Round. It was negativity-free for the most part. Environment, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to many more to come, starting this coming weekend and all the way through many preseason or many regular seasons and postseasons to come.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody who were a part of Discord and joined us yesterday, and thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe because we're going to be filling up this YouTube Lightning Round Podcast YouTube channel here. So, all right, first off, thanks. Welcome, Craig and Corey and everybody else joining us this morning. Thank you. We appreciate it. And let's go ahead and just talk about kind of the big headlines from this game. And I think in no particular order, I'm not going on the most important, but one that kind of has been a sticking point now, which was kind of an interesting little storyline that developed last night, was how many wide receivers are the Chargers going to carry? Because we know they've got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joshua Palmer, and DeAndre Carter pretty much locked down. You can assume Jalen Guyton, but with the way Michael Bandy played last night and with the way Joe Reed played last night, maybe there is talk of someone slipping in for that fifth wide receiver over Guyton, or maybe carrying a sixth, Jamie. This was an interesting little storyline that developed last night with these two wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they get to six wide receivers. It was something that we talked about when we kind of did the breakdown before the camp started, and I'd like to see them carry six wide receivers, because if they're carrying six wide receivers, it probably means they're not carrying four running backs or three quarterbacks, which we'll get to in a bit. But I'm just not sure how they get there if they're set on carrying three quarterbacks and four running backs. But if they do get there, for sure, Joe Reed looked really good last night. The route that he ran for that long touchdown pass, the kind of flag route that he ran, the double move, was probably the best route he's run at any point in 3 years as a Charger. Actually looked like a professional wide receiver, selling a double move and getting open. Mm-hmm. He was wide open and had to stop and come back to the ball that was overthrown by Chase Daniel, who we'll talk about here in a bit. And Michael Michael Bandy was open all night.
Yep.
Every time they needed him to make a play, he made a play. Third down, first down, second down, in the red zone, whatever, he was making plays. So very impressive for both those guys. Bandy looks like he isn't what I would call super explosive, but he's kind of slippery in traffic. Got a little bit of twitch, just a little bit of an extra gear with the ball in his hands, which is something this offense needs. So, adding a guy like Carter who has that, and adding a guy like a Bandy who has that would be a good addition. I think it offers a skill set that the Chargers, or a physical trait that the Chargers really don't have right now. And a little surprised to see Joe Reed as the number one kick returner. It doesn't sound like he's returned kicks very much in camp, at least not when Garrett's been there. He did not return kicks at all when we were there for the scrimmage. So a little bit surprising to see that, but I think he had one decent return where he made a couple moves in traffic to pick up a couple extra yards.
Yep.
And he looked good as a receiver. So both those guys put their best foot forward in extended playing time, which is exactly what you want. And it kind of speaks to something that I think we've been talking about, and I know I've been talking about when I've done other shows recently, is the overarching theme of this camp, which is competition and depth. Those are two things the Chargers haven't had a lot of in the preseason and in recent years, really for most of the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
They haven't had a lot of depth at most of their positions. And right now they have a ton of depth. All those depth guys are playing well. They're all pushing for roster spots, and they're going to force some tough decisions on the coaches. And that's what you want those depth guys to be able to make plays. And we're seeing that at a level that we really haven't seen. And it's good to see. It's really encouraging.
Yeah. We saw kind of a KJ Hill forced upon us last year, who they ended up keeping. And Jalen Guyton was a guy that they were trying to carve out a role for to return kicks at times. But now we're seeing Bandy and Joe Reed both return kicks in this preseason game. Very surprised, like Jamie mentioned. I was surprised that Joe Reed returned to kickoff. I haven't heard anything about him returning kicks up until this coming week. So kind of a late addition to that return team. But Bandy and Reed both had their stock go up yesterday. A great whip route from Michael Bandy on that touchdown, and then kind of kicked it into gear, able to turn that corner and get in there for a touchdown. And he had the most yards last night of any Charger receiver, had the most receptions of any Charger receiver. Both Daniel and Stick were looking at Bandy a lot. I know that Joe Reed caught that long touchdown pass, and there were just a bunch of tweets about a blown coverage, but when you go back and watch that, that's all Joe Reed setting that move up. It isn't so much a blown coverage as it is a great double move by Joe Reed, which Jamie was alluding to, and he was open because of that move. He got himself open. It wasn't because the safety forgot or the corner fell down. He made that move. Great move by Joe Reed. Great touchdown. Had some great catches throughout, and they had a nifty little return, kind of added a couple extra yards on the end of one of his returns. So I thought Bandy and Reed kind of made a case for maybe keeping one of them if they can. I know a practice squad spot might be close for one of them maybe, but if you've got DeAndre Carter as your starting kick returner, punt returner, and Jalen Guyton isn't really that so much anymore, it might be interesting if you've got a guy like Joe Reed and Michael Bandy as a depth receiver and as a second backup returner as well on this roster that could carve out a role them on special teams for one of these wide receivers. It was a nice little addition to this preseason game. And like James was mentioning, I mean, we're so used to seeing 3.5 quarters of guys that are not making the roster and probably not playing football ever again. And now we're seeing rookies playing full on to the fourth quarter. Lots of depth guys kind of starting to earn little roles on the back end of the depth chart. It was really fun last night for a preseason game. It was fun to see these guys compete. And Bandy and Reed were two of those guys that kind of made a case for themselves last night.
Yeah, I thought Reed had 3 moments. We talked about the kick return. We talked about the long touchdown. And there was I think it was a third down catch where I believe it was Stick threw the ball behind him on an out route.
Ugh.
And he stopped and came back for the ball and attacked the ball in the air behind him, caught it with his hands instead of trying to trap it against his body, and made a physical contested catch that we haven't really seen him make. So those are 3 positive moments for Joe Reed, building a case for making the roster, or at least hanging on the practice squad. And Bandy, like you mentioned, was all over the field. Making plays in the slot, making plays outside, running great routes, making plays with the ball in his hands. It was fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah. So just moving past these wide receivers, another fun little storyline yesterday was just the kind of emergence of Chris Rumph putting on that extra muscle. He got a sack, nice little tackle for a loss. He exhibited some real power from that muscle he put on this offseason, and he showed real power in his hands. He knocked that left tackle off balance, which got him that sack, and he looked really, really impressive last night as that third edge rusher now that can kind of help out when Mack and Bosa are out and add some juice off the edge. Rumph was a huge highlight last night.
Yeah, he looked like a guy who belongs on the field, which is not something we could always say about him last year. And I think, you talk about the competition and you talk about the depth, and now you add another wrinkle to that, which is the development, the year-to-year development of the depth players, which is something we also haven't seen a lot of over the last 5 to 10 years. And it was really on full display with Rumph. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's still explosive, he's using his length really well. Using the power in the bull rush. He was all over the quarterback last night. I think, he had the one sack. It looked to me like there were 3 or 4 other opportunities that he could have had sacks where either a teammate knocked him off or he just missed the play. But he was really close to getting home several times. He was also very active in the run game, which is something that he wasn't particularly good at last year. So seeing that development in his pass rush and seeing him become more of an asset against the run is really encouraging, and it really speaks to, I think, the culture this coaching staff is building, and it speaks to what they're teaching and how they're developing these guys, which, like I said, has not been the case with previous coaching staffs.
Oh, definitely not. No. And absolutely loved what Rumph did yesterday, and he just is visibly bigger, and you could tell he's got added some moves to that toolbox this offseason. So let's just stick with the D-line. I mean, I think there were a couple guys that really flashed last night, and 2 of them for me are Brendan Fehoko and Morgan Fox.
Yeah, Fehoko was really good last night. He was heavily involved in the middle of that line in the run defense. He chased some plays down from behind, got a couple pressures with bull rushes. Really, really good. And Fox was close to getting home a couple times for some sacks. He also was able to be disciplined and hold contain on a couple of plays that allowed teammates to get to the quarterback or make plays in the running game. And that was something that I think really stood out to me as you watch the way the defensive line played. And we didn't even see the starters. This was all second, third, and fourth string guys.
Yep.
You watch the way these guys plays, and they were playing disciplined, complementary football. They were doing their jobs. They weren't trying to do too much. They weren't getting out of their rush lanes. They were staying home, doing what they were asked to do, and waiting for their teammates to make plays. And that's, again, something that we haven't seen a lot of in the last few years is these guys, especially in the towards the back of the roster, just doing what they're being asked to do and not trying to do too much and helping each other make those plays. So that's really encouraging. So I think it tells you how well this coaching staff is teaching, how they're communicating, how they're laying the foundation for some of these younger players, because most of the guys outside of Morgan Fox and Jerry Tillery, most of the guys who are on the field with the defensive line, these are guys who don't play a whole lot. They've been on the practice squad, they're rookies, they're second year players, they haven't been on the field a lot, and they're playing like veterans in some ways. And that's encouraging because it tells you how well the coaching staff is doing, teaching their concepts, teaching their defense. And you could see it all over the field. It wasn't just the defensive line. Linebackers making good reads. There was a great read by Jasir Taylor, who was in man coverage, followed his man across. It was in the red zone, followed his man from left to right across the formation, diagnosed run, came off his man, came back to the ball, met the running back in the hole, made a big hit. He got run over. He didn't finish the tackle, but that's something you can fix, right? Yeah. He was in position. He made a good read. He was in position. And there were tons of plays like that. JT Woods had a couple plays like that where he knew where he needed to be and he got there and he just didn't quite make the play, but he had great reads and great breaks on the ball. This is all things that we have not seen from the backup players for the last few years. And I think it really breeds confidence in what these coaches are teaching.
Yeah, the process is good, and we'll get to some of that process in a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, a lot of these rookies and UDFAs that we've seen in the past, the process is just bad all the way through. But it seems like the process was good up until the very last moment with a Jasir Taylor, with a JT Woods. We'll talk about Dean Leonard in a second. But everything up until the ball's toward them, or they're going for the tackle, or they're trying to make a break on the ball and break up the pass, the process is perfect. And then at the very moment, they don't finish the play. So finishing is one of those things you kind of expect in a first preseason game when you're not tackling for months on end and you're just in training camp without having to bring anybody down. You kind of expect some of those missed tackles. So a lot of those long runs from that wide receiver playing quarterback last night don't really worry me as much as the process looks good. The contain was good. It was just a lot of missed tackles from a bunch of guys that haven't tackled in a while, and that'll be better once we hit week 1. But yeah, so Brendan Fehoko had a really, really big run stop on a second down. It was a second and long. He really clogged things up. He was kind of a guy who didn't pop on the stat sheet. He didn't have a ton of tackles, but you could tell he really clogged the middle of that lineup all game long when he was in. And Morgan Fox just seemed like just wreaking havoc in the backfield. He was there when the Chris Rumph sack was there. He was like towards the quarterback's feet, and Rumph was able to, the quarterback couldn't step up, and he was able to get that sack. The pass breakup from Michael Davis, Morgan Fox made a hit on the quarterback at the same time. There's a lot of interior pressure, which is something we haven't seen in forever. There was a lot of interior pressure last night, and Morgan Fox was a big one. A guy who was able to get to the quarterback. He was there in the backfield multiple times, and you just love to see some interior pressure because we didn't see a lot of it in the last few years. So Morgan Fox, Brendan Fehoko, Chris Rumph, big time on that D-line early on in that game.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I don't know if you saw, but Sebastian Joseph Day was on Twitter this morning talking about how good Fehoko was last night, and he was also talking about Morgan Fox.
Yep.
There was another name he didn't mention, but I don't want to add to the pot that the guys are talking about in the chat, so I won't mention his name. But there was a name he didn't mention.
What are we talking about? Let's see. Okay. I think there should be a rule. So Frank made a rule, and now you're abiding to it. Okay. We haven't even acknowledged it, but you're going to abide to it. I think there should be a rule every time 99's name is mentioned. I won't say his name. $1 in the pot. So we have to pay if we mention his name and he's not good. I mean, so we have to ignore him altogether. Is that the plan here? Okay.
Yep.
Anyway. All right. So, let's see. So
maybe if we ignore him, he'll go away.
That's the plan. Okay. All right. So we mentioned so Michael Davis. Mentioned Michael Davis had the PBU. He forced an incompletion where he kind of squeezed that running back towards the sideline who couldn't get both feet in. And he had a great stick on, I think it was the first pass from scrimmage where they had like a 2-3 yard completion. Michael Davis was right there to bring him right down with no gain. I thought he was really good in the limited time he played and kind of showed, kind of the old shades of Michael Davis, kind of click and close, came downhill, made some plays, was in on that pass breakup when Morgan Fox hit the quarterback. But I thought Michael Davis had a pretty good game last night too.
Yeah, Davis played really well, and he was playing all over the place. He played outside. He played in the slot. I think he played some money and some star. So they're kind of they're expanding his role and seeing how much he can handle. And I thought he looked really good, particularly in the slot. Comfortable playing short zones where he can keep his eye on the ball, come downhill and make plays, where he doesn't have to worry so much about getting his head around like he does when he's chasing guys down the sideline. So Davis looked good. He actually earned a compliment from Staley after the game. He specifically called out how well Vato played, so that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Said that he thought he tackled really well, and he particularly said that he was impressed with his run defense, his run support, which is something that they've been challenging him to be better at. So
yeah,
definitely played really well. There were a lot of guys in the secondary who were in position and played pretty well, and didn't necessarily make plays, but reason for optimism.
Yeah. And before we kind of get off of it, we got to mention run game. Let's talk about these two running backs because Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller had some flashes last night too. Yeah,
Kelly looked stronger and more explosive than he's looked at any point as a Charger, running with more confidence. Still kind of running to contact at the second level a little bit. He broke a couple tackles, caught the ball pretty well. Spiller looked amazing. I think this is a battle that's going to go on for a while. I think they're really trying to give Joshua Kelly the opportunity to earn that RB2 role out of camp, or at least maybe split some of that role with Spiller to start so they don't have to throw everything at Spiller right away. But Kelly looked good. Spiller looks just like a different breed. There is a stop and start ability with him where he can juke and cut without sacrificing speed. He had several runs where he was weaving and cutting in between traffic that I didn't think he could do, but he looked really good. I don't remember. Did he catch the ball? I don't remember seeing him catch any passes.
Oh, yeah, he caught the ball. Remember, he had to like basically do a back bend because stick threw it almost behind his head, and he had to adjust. It was a swing pass that he could have taken 15, 20 yards. But
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yep,
it was only
I remember
10,
that.
yeah.
Yep. And he also had a couple good blitz pickups and pass protection where he came over and helped the right tackle. So Spiller looked really, really good. He looks like a guy who is certainly going to be RB2 at some point this season, but very well might find himself on the field with Austin Eckler, which I hope is the eventual game plan, so they can get Eckler in the slot a little bit more and create some havoc by having two running backs on the field who can make plays. I can't wait to see more of Spiller. I would have liked to see more of him. I think there was a third and short play where they threw the ball that I would have liked to see him get the ball in his hands and maybe a little bit more in the red zone and maybe a little earlier in the game. But he looked really, really good. He looks, like I said, like a different breed compared to what we're used to seeing from Chargers backup running backs the last few years.
Yeah, crazy change of direction in Isaiah Spiller. He was electric for a preseason game. Never let that first guy bring him down. He feels like he's shot out of a cannon when he gets that handoff. And like we were talking about, really great change of direction or adjustment to get that pass that was behind him. So he showed off really, really good hands throughout training camp and kind of showed it out in preseason. And Joshua Kelly showed he had looked like he's playing with more confidence, had some wiggle on that first drive. He was the most effective running back last night. He had 5.3 yards per carry. He also caught 3 passes for 28 yards. So he was able to pitch in, was nice for the limited time he got in, but Spiller just seems like a totally different running back that we're not used to seeing, and a guy that is going to eventually earn that RB2 role. He was kind of rolled out as the RB4 last night behind Kelly and, Eckler not playing, but then Kelly and Roundtree, but then Spiller getting snaps, but that's going to change real fast because with the way he is with the ball in his hands, you got to assume that he's going to be RB2 sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. It wouldn't really surprise me if they start the season splitting that RB2 role. Just because it seems like the coaching staff is really committed to finding a clear role for Kelly. Seems like he worked hard in the offseason, developed his body, developed his game, and they're really trying to reward him for that. So I could see them splitting that role, at least for the first few weeks of the season, but it's only a matter of time before Spiller grabs it, I think. He's just a better runner. He's more patient, better vision, better change of direction. I think the hands are better. And I think long-term, he's going to be a better blocker too.
In the comments, we got to thank you for being in a human time zone today, broadcasting it early in the morning. Won't happen again. Thanks for the adaptive approach. From Hungary, thanks for watching. Junius, you had a Salyer clip I saw this morning. What were you trying to point out? So there was a run by Joshua Kelly, and we could talk about Jamari Salyer and Zion too right after this, but in the clip, you can see Salyer basically knock the D-line off balance, and he's almost falling on his face. And Salyer then runs him into the lineman next to him, basically just keeping him crushed inside and not being able to bounce outside because Kelly was able to get outside and get a first down there. It was a really great pull down and lock and twist move from Salyer there. But I thought Zion and Salyer were a lot of fun to watch last night. I think they were both very impressive.
They both played really well, and you could see that the coaches were really trying to test them in the running game. They ran behind both guys quite a bit and with a lot of success, especially when they needed it. 3rd and short, 4th down, they were putting the ball in their hands or in the running back's hands behind their two young guards. Salyer was, excuse me. Somebody said it in the Discord last night. Salyer looked like the bouncer throwing guys out of the club. He was just moving bodies, throwing guys around, kind of having his way with the backups on the Rams roster. He looked really, really good. Would have liked to see him play some right tackle last night. I really would have liked to see that. Maybe we'll get it next week, but he looks like the real deal inside. And maybe we'll see a little bit of him playing both guard spots and maybe some center as things progress here.
Yeah. Yeah. Salyer was impressive. Zion. And then, obviously we were watching the right tackle, Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton, none of which were too egregious last night. I didn't think either of them really popped so much. I know there was one rep from Trey Pipkins where his man was able to get to Chase Daniel and hit him while he's throwing, but Chase Daniel was kind of rolling into Trey Pipkins' area, so I'm not sure that that's really a loss on Pipkins' side, but I thought both of them were just fine. What'd you think of Norton and Pipkins last night?
I think the best thing you can say is I didn't think either one of them really stood out for the reasons that we're used to them standing out.
Sure.
There weren't any glaring struggles. There weren't any huge losses. The play you're talking about with Pipkins, I thought he lost because he got pushed back into the backfield 3 or 4 yards. He did anchor and settle down, which is something that he seems like he's getting better at, is even when he loses off the snap, he's able to find his anchor and sink down and stop the rush. So he got pushed back a little bit on that play. Seemed like he'd stopped the defender's momentum, and then Daniel rolled into the pressure. So maybe a little bit on the quarterback, maybe a little bit on the right tackle. But other than that, I thought Pipkins was really good in the run game, blocked really well in the run, which is what he does best. And he was adequate to maybe slightly above adequate in pass protection. Like I said, no glaring losses, no major weaknesses. He was kind of invisible in some ways, which is kind of what you want from your right tackle.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some people that struggled last night, because we've been pretty positive, but it wasn't all good. Who do we want to point out? Who do you want to point out first that you thought had kind of well, we should probably just talk about Dean Leonard, because he's probably the one who had on paper the worst night. He penalty on special teams, gave up 2 touchdowns, a 2-point conversion. He had his issues last night.
Yeah, I think there were some positives and some negatives. He had the penalty on special teams, but he fought through 2 blockers and did make a big hit. He just needs to know where the ball is and maybe let the punt returner catch the ball before he hits him.
When J.K. Scott hits the moon on the way up, it's hard to be patient.
It's hard to time it.
Yeah.
When there's actually hang time and it's not a line drive.
Yep.
I thought the positive is he was in position, him being Leonard. He was in position pretty much all night. He was in phase with everybody who caught the ball against him or who drew penalties against him. He just needs to get his head around. And these are things that you expect young corners to struggle with. So I think if you're looking for the positives, he struggled. He had some penalties. He gave up a couple big plays. He got mossed a couple times. But I think those are things that you can work out. As long as he's in phase and he's where he's supposed to be, if you can teach him to get his head around and get his hands up and knock the pass away, I think he'll be fine. I think the hardest part is teaching him to be in phase, and he was there. So the other stuff I think you can clean up.
Yeah, that's what kind of something I wanted to mention. I think because he's getting roasted on Twitter, and he gave up a few touchdowns and everything, but like we talked about earlier, the process is so good up until that last moment. He was able to fight through and get to the returner on that special teams rep where he ran into the returner. He did a great job getting downfield. If he's a second later and doesn't try to hit the returner before he catches it, it's a really, really good play. Just a second behind. I think
it might even be a turnover. If he times it up better, he might draw that ball loose and it's a turnover.
Because he was only a tick early. Yeah. And then on, the deep pass down the sideline, he's running stride for stride with that running back. JT Woods comes over just a hair too late. ends up taking Dean Leonard out of the play on the tackle, and he's able to run down the sideline for a touchdown. He's there stride for stride with that wide receiver. You hope that the safety can come over the top and help break that pass up next time, but with a corner to be able to be in a wide receiver's hip pocket, the process is better than the result there because the technique is perfect up until not getting his head around or getting a hand up in the passing lane. It's same with every rep he had. It was like if he just got his head around or just got his hand up, that's deflection. Maybe if he gets his head around, it's an interception. I just think that though he gave up a bunch of touchdowns and he struggled, obviously, there is so much to like about the reps he put on tape there that I think the coaches are just like, look, you're almost there. And I don't think he's in the, like, let's demote him and this was a terrible game and he's going to be knocked down the depth chart type of game. Yes, some bad things happen, but that's what the preseason is for. And again, his process was so good up until the last moment. I actually liked a lot of what Dean Leonard did. I know that the result wasn't good, but it was just so good up until that point that I was kind of happy with what Leonard put on tape yesterday.
Yeah, and honestly, in the preseason, score doesn't matter. I think you want results, but I think the process, especially with a 7th round pick, process is more important than results right now. Mm-hmm. You want to know that he understands where he's supposed to be, that he can run with the wide receivers, he can stay in phase, and he did those things. Mm-hmm. And I think the rest will come with reps. And keep in mind, he's a 7th round pick. Frank keeps saying it. He played 1 year of NCAA college football. He came from Canada. So he's literally learning on the fly.
Yeah.
And I think those are things that they'll be able to teach. The fact that they already have him in position says that he's probably going to be able to pick these things up and learn. And I think process is something that's been lacking for a long time. It's obvious the coaches are focused on it, and I think they'll reward that. So I wouldn't get too down on him for not getting his head around. I think we should be focused on the fact that he's a 7th round pick and he was where he was supposed to be, just barely missed making a couple plays.
Yeah, and Jamie kind of mentioned it earlier about how there's not so much negativity in the Discord. Surprise, surprise, lightning rounds not being negative. We're just being real, and here we are taking the positive spin on a bad day from Dean Leonard. Round of applause for us. I think that was good on us. Because really, I mean, but in all seriousness, I do think that the process is so much more important with Dean Leonard and how raw he was coming in to the NFL, and to be stride for stride and the technique being so good up until the last moment. I think you accept that right now from a guy who was a 7th round pick, and I'm happy to see his progression through the next 2 games. I think the other one we should mention who didn't have a very good game was Chase Daniel. We should probably talk about the quarterbacks too. God, I know. At some point, we had to do it. Everything from Daniel was late. It had no mustard on it. Everything just floated. He probably should have had thrown at least 2 interceptions that I can think of, if not 3 or 4. Yeah. He had and it was really hard to get a gauge on any of these wide receivers when he was in, because he just wasn't getting the ball out in time, and he wasn't accurate. He was all over the place. Poor Joshua Palmer just couldn't get anything thrown his way, even remotely catchable.
Yeah, Daniel was really bad. He was late. He was behind receivers. It seemed like his arm was completely dead. Even on the one big play he made to Joe Reed, he underthrew that ball by a good 5 yards, and Reed had to work his way back to the ball. Everything had too much air under it. It seemed like he was aiming and guiding the ball. And for a veteran quarterback, it seemed like he really had to see the receiver open before the ball came out. And by then it's too late. So not very impressed with Chase Daniel, somebody who I thought after the scrimmage looked like he had the inside track on the QB2 job. Now I'm thinking maybe not.
Yeah. Because like we talked about on the past podcast, it's pretty clear that they're going to keep Easton Stick. And whether that's as QB3 or now maybe QB2, I just don't think they risk putting him on the wire like Jamie had talked about yesterday in the Discord. I think they're a little bit scared. I agree with them there. And I mean, even though Daniel had the stats on a long pass to Joe Reed, it seemed like Easton Stick was a little bit better yesterday. He was and that's saying something because Stick wasn't all that great. He had a keeper for a touchdown that he ran in. He had a really good just seed to Camp Moyer on that 2-point conversion. He really rifled that one in there. A lot of throws were kind of touch and go. I thought he had a fine game. Kind of showed that he's more of a run first quarterback. He really tried to tuck it and run. Didn't show a lot. Really good touch on the ball, didn't show very good accuracy, but for the most part was able to kind of coordinate a couple touchdown runs and march the team down the field a couple times behind him and Spiller and Michael Bandy. So yeah, I think the question now is if Chase Daniel makes the team. A guy that we had just locked in at QB2 just looked like he lost a little bit last night. Those balls coming out of his hand looks like a guy who is on his last legs in the NFL. I mean, if Justin Herbert's going down, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is at that point. But in terms of QB2, I think we got a real competition now between Easton Stick and Chase Daniel, and that's saying something because I did not think we were even going to have this conversation at all, let alone week one.
Yeah, I think we've been pushing for them to keep 2 quarterbacks. I think we've been assuming that they're going to keep 3. I think if you are in the camp of keeping 2, then you're probably hoping that Stick wins out.
Yeah.
Because I think the only reason you keep 3 is because you think Daniel's a better quarterback. You still think there's meat left on the bone to develop Stick, and you're afraid that Stick won't make it to the practice squad. I think he would, but I don't think the team believes that he would. So I think if you want them to keep 2, then you're rooting for Stick to win the QB2 job, because I think there's no reason to keep Chase Daniel if Easton Stick wins the QB2 job. I think you can have pretty much anybody on the practice squad as QB3 and roll with Stick and Herbert as your 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. I think there were a lot of fans who probably enjoyed those red zone packages with Stick running the ball in and throwing that dart to Camp Moyer. It scares me a little bit, just a little.
Yeah.
Because they seem to have this weakness for Stick, and hopefully they come to their senses and they don't do this, but I'm a little concerned that we might see the ball come out of Herbert's hands in the red zone in favor of getting Stick on the field. There's no reason for that. It would be stupid because everything that Stick does, Herbert does better. I'm just worried that they might try to force that and overthink things a little bit. But Stick, I thought, played pretty well within the confines of the game plan that they called for him. He wasn't terribly effective throwing the ball down the field.
No. I
think he only attempted 4 passes with 10 or more air yards. He completed 1. He overthrew 2, 1 really badly.
Oh, to Michael Bandy.
Michael Bandy.
Just needed a little touch, and he roped it on a line and couldn't hit him.
Well, there was that one, and then there was another one on the final drive where he tried to gun Gandy on like a dig route, and Gandy needed to be like 7'2" to catch ball.
Yeah, I was going to say,
so high.
Shaq wouldn't even caught that one.
And then the other one was the interception at the end of the game where I thought Bandy probably should have caught it, but it was a little bit late and a little bit behind Stick, and it was gunned in there to the point that there wasn't a whole lot of time to react to it. So
yeah,
Stick, like Herbert early in his career, Stick needs to learn how to throw the ball with a little bit more touch. I think he's still at the point where he needs to see guys open before he throws the ball. I'd like to see him lead guys and show that he can throw the ball down the field a little bit more. But if you can keep him in that phase of throwing the screen passes, checking the ball down, keeping most of the throws in that 5 to 6 yard range in the air, I think he can be pretty effective. But if he starts to have to push the ball down the field a little bit more, I think that's where you're going to start seeing some of the weaknesses in his game. But he executed what they wanted him to execute last night, and he did it on a higher level than Daniel did. So
yeah,
we've been not against, but we've been for a while saying that Easton Stick probably doesn't belong on this roster. Last night, he looked like he was more deserving of being on the roster than Chase Daniel.
Yep, absolutely. I would agree, and I think everybody, if you're not looking at the stat sheet, which would show that Daniel had more yards and more completions, you could tell just watching the game that Easton Stick was the more effective quarterback yesterday. And you want to explore this stupid idea from King James? We love the King, Bring back Cardell and let him compete for that QB3 like the good old days.
Is Cardell even playing anymore? I don't think he is. Hard pass. Thank you very much.
Is he a consultant with Ohio State, or what is he doing now? He's doing something. Anyway, he's working in football, but no thank you to Cardell. How about Berkovici, Jamie? You want to bring him back?
No.
The ASU legend? No? Okay.
No.
Let's see. So a couple other guys that I thought kind of were a little bit down last night. Will Clapp got beat real bad for a sack. I thought Foster Sorrell got whipped a bunch at tackle. And then just want to add in Larry Roundtree, who just seemed like he could not get anything going on the ground. 8 yards on 3 carries. He just looked so slow compared to Isaiah Spiller and Joshua Kelly, who really had some bounce in their step last night. Larry Roundtree starting to move down that depth chart a little bit after last night.
There's one other guy who I thought struggled. I'm blanking on his name. He's a defensive tackle.
99?
99.
Yeah.
He was not very good. He didn't play a whole lot last night. Hopefully that's because they just wanted to see more of other guys and not because they think he's a starter and they're treating him as such. But Clapp was pretty bad last night.
Yeah.
He got whipped a few times.
And
really
he's
badly.
Basically being given that backup center spot at the moment, and he's not playing like he deserves it.
No, he's not. He was really bad. I think that's it for the guys who struggled. I don't remember. Woods was a little up and down. JT Woods was a little up and down. He was close to making 2 or 3 plays. He had that play along the sideline where he knocked Leonard off of the wide receiver for the long touchdown pass. Trying to think of what else.
So Cole Christensen looked absolutely lost in the second level to me last night. Missed multiple tackles. Emeka Egbule, another guy who came into camp as that edge rusher behind Chris Rumph, was not effective as an edge rusher last night. He lost contain on 2 running plays last night that I counted. I thought he struggled a lot too.
He was up and down. There were 3 or 4 plays where he really should have had sacks, and it was like he got to the quarterback and just didn't know what to do with him when he got there. I think he missed at least 3, maybe 4 sacks, and he was around the ball a lot in the running game, but didn't make plays. So it's hard to see how they're going to evaluate him. I think the missed tackles hurt. Not finishing plays hurts, but he was in position to make a lot of plays. So again, if you're going to give Leonard the benefit of the doubt for the process, you got to give Egbule a little bit of a benefit of the doubt for the process. Now he's entering year 4. Leonard's our 7th round pick in year 1. So there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of experience. You'd expect the guy in year 4 to make at least a couple of those plays, but he did show the ability to be in position to make plays. He just needs to finish them.
So just catching up on the comments here. Hymas did take some snaps at center last year. Maybe the guy to take over as the backup center, who's been very quiet this camp. Surprisingly, it seems like Sawyer's kind of jumped him already on the depth chart in the interior. Let's see. Chargers Barry, big themes. Players not turning their heads. Yes, we mentioned that, but we if you missed it, we had talked about how the process was good up until that point. And poor tackling, another thing that not something you need to worry about right now in the first preseason game. If you watch any other preseason game other than the Chargers, everyone's missing tackles. You just aren't tackling for months, so guys are cold right now in terms of tackling. Not a thing to really worry about quite yet. And it's going to happen throughout like the first week or 2 of the NFL too. That seems to happen always. And Jamie, I want to ask you, because Charger Berries also asked another question. Who wins more games in a season, Kellen Clemens or Chase Daniel? Let's take the prime Kellen Clemens and prime Chase Daniel, because at the end of the career is depressing. At their best, who you got?
Probably Chase Daniel.
Same here. I was going to say Chase Daniel. I'd take Chase Daniel over Kellen Clemens. I think he wins more games.
I don't think there was a prime Kellen Clemens.
Well, that's true too. Let's see. So, and speaking of getting their head around, we saw Zont yesterday get a PI without getting his head around, and if he does get his head around, probably has an interception. Another guy who didn't get his head around. I thought Troy Reeder popped a lot yesterday. He had a third down stop, was consistently on a ton of plays last night. Want to shout out Damon Lloyd, who's very active, finished second on the team in tackles behind Reeder. And then I thought on the back of the depth chart, Ben DeLuca made some nice downhill tackles last night too.
DeLuca made some really nice reads and came downhill in a hurry on a couple of running plays. He looked really good. I thought Lloyd looked good against the run, looked pretty good as a blitzer. Not as good in coverage. Looks a little lost out there in space and coverage, but if you're looking for somebody to come downhill and make a tackle, I think Lloyd is showing he can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and can't forget this. Craig is on the money here. Dan Fouts also had a rough night last night, getting the numbers wrong, getting the players wrong, mispronouncing names. It was a tough night for Dan Fouts, who loved him as a Chargers quarterback. I should probably hang it up as an announcer, to be honest with you. Loved what he did with part of the team, but I don't think he offers much in terms of analysis anymore.
Yeah, he's pretty bad. He's been bad for a while now.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't pronounce names, but Agbula last night was just terrible. There was just so many mispronounced, like not even close. There's no A in Agbule, but anyway.
They also paired Dan with, I think, a first-time announcer in Ian Eagle's kid.
Eagle, yeah, uh-huh.
So that didn't help at all.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. If there's anything else you have, Jamie, that you want to touch on, I think we pretty much covered most of it.
Yeah, I would just say be patient with the tackling because they're not tackling in camp.
Yeah.
And I think the penalties were frustrating last night. Some of them were a little questionable. But I think, you've got second, third, and fourth stringers playing, a lot of rookies, second-year players. I think you expect some of that sloppiness and some of that lack of discipline in the first preseason game. I think that's pretty common across the board for all teams. So frustrating. I'm sure it's something the coaches are going to focus on. It's not something I would get too hung up on in the first preseason game, considering who was on the field.
Yeah. And I think we've mentioned it a lot, and I will keep pounding it home. I think the process is really important with a lot of these guys, and I think it was especially with Dean Leonard last night, who was getting absolutely torched. I actually am happy with what I saw from Dean Leonard last night, and I think the process for a lot of these guys are exciting, and I do think a big takeaway is how many guys are fighting for an end of roster depth spot like Jamie talked about, and also how exciting is a preseason game. These things are supposed to be boring. They are not supposed to be as exciting as they have been last night. Seeing Zion and Michael Davis and Rumph and Spiller and Kelly and all these guys pop last night was a lot of fun. So I think that's a big takeaway. There's some real key depth happening, and there's some real competition. So this has been fun. I can't wait for week 2 and week 3. We'll probably go live after those games, depending on the time. But thanks so much. Real quick, King James wants to know what to eat. I say a breakfast burrito. Jamie, how's that sound?
I'm going to make myself a breakfast sandwich.
Hey, see, there you go. One of those. So thank you. Appreciate it. If you didn't hear, our thoughts on Isaiah Spiller or Michael Bandy or anybody else, go back and watch or listen, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube because we're doing videos for all of our podcasts now. So make sure you're here, you're subscribed, because we'll be here making videos for you from here on out. So thanks, everybody.
And we're also, just wanted to add, we're also going to be working on some film study for YouTube as well, I think. So some additional new content to look forward to.
All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you.
Thanks, everybody. You did it again.
Well, I took your line? Okay.
You did.
Hold on. Take 2. Hold on. Let's start over. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.